All right. Welcome everyone to our Mending through Embroidery workshop as part of the Circular Economy Week London. My name is Lara Pohl-Martell and I'm the co-founder and president of the Circular Economy Student Society at LSE. And the society, just to give you some background, was just founded this academic year, and our aim is to raise awareness and knowledge of the circular economy among the students at LSE, and also to kind of provide a platform for students to engage with experts in the field. And so far, we've had some amazing events throughout Lent term. And yeah, we're really excited to have this really interactive workshop today in collaboration with the Slow Fashion Movement UK. And yeah, the circular economy has so many facets. And for this event, as part of the Circular Economy Week, we thought it would be good to focus on fashion because it's something that relates to everyone. And to focus on the aspects of the circular economy of repairing and upcycling. So we'll learn how to mend and how to embroider today. And without further ado, let me introduce you to our fantastic host or workshop host, Amy Leete. So Amy is an embroiderer who likes to mend both visibly and invisibly and to create artwork with embroidery. And I can really recommend to check out her Instagram channel because it's really amazing what she's doing. Yeah, and Amy is also a proponent of the circular economy. So she's really trying to have her embroidery work as low waste as possible. And today she's going to share some wisdom of that with us. So we're really excited to have you here today, Amy. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Lara.
Yeah, and for those of us, or for those of you rather, who are in the live session, if you have any questions throughout the session, feel free to just ask them in the chat or raise your virtual hand. And we'll also have a Q&A at the end of the session. So yeah, I'll hand it over to you, Amy.
Oh, thank you again. Honestly, I'm so excited to be here and talking about something that has really gone from just a tiny interest I had into what is now a small business for me. And I hope that whether you're a complete beginner or you're an expert embroiderer, I hope today is fun and useful in some way. Just to kind of begin with, we'll be going from the basics, like the real basics here, simply because, as with anything, having that strong foundational knowledge will ensure that everything you build on goes even better. And so, yeah, as Lara said, I'm Amy. I'm a Slow Fashion UK ambassador. We're the UK branch of the global slow fashion movement. And yeah, I love to embroider, and I've gone from a tiny, cheap Amazon embroidery kit that I got for Christmas one year, and now I spend every spare minute embroidering for baby showers, weddings, birthdays. If you can think of it, I've been asked to make it. It's there are some unique requests out there, let's say. If you could go on to the next slide, Lara, and I'll show you some of the things that I've made, and really this did all really begin with a YouTube video. I saw a YouTube video on embroidery and I really ran with it. And one of the reasons why I was so excited to do this talk today is because this is what started me off, and now it's a huge part of my life. And so I really hope that I inspire some people too. And so why embroidery, right? You kind of have that idea that it's a bit of an old ladies thing to do, right? And the simple answer is that any kind of artwork allows us to have a personal relationship with an object. So when you put time and care and effort into something, you form an attachment to it. And that's what embroidery is about, right? It's caring. So if you could go to the next slide, Lara, please try not to laugh. This is me on the left. This is me at age about 10 with a sock monkey I made. And I think that was one of my first sewing projects in general. And I still have that sock monkey. You know, it was a pair of old grubby socks, and I stuffed it with some old pillow, and I made something sentimental out of it, you know, something that mattered to me more than an old pair of grubby socks. And then a little bit later on, this is me at prom, and I made this dress. It was something that I'd never done before, but I found myself enjoying the way that you can craft something and it has more of a meaning than if you just buy it. And apart from just having that kind of interest, really, embroidery and tailoring allowed me to express my style in a world that didn't want to cater for my body. I'm plus size, but also I'm disabled. I have type 1 diabetes. And learning how to sew allowed me to adapt my clothes to my medical condition. So for example, you can see on this arm, I have here, this is a blood glucose reading device, and it stands using my phone, but through too many layers of fabric, it won't work. And so learning how to remove the lining of a coat in one square makes a huge difference. And that's something you can't buy. It's really a way to, embroidery and tailoring, it's a way to make a product useful for you. And it allowed me to gain confidence. You know, I think until about 5-6 years ago, especially, plus size fashion wasn't a thing. It was leggings and tunics in the back of New Look. And being able to make my own clothes allowed me to wear the fashions I wanted. And embroidery is part of that. It allows anyone of any size, any shape to make something unique for them. And that's what I love so much about it. And really, that's what slow fashion's about too. It's not just about wearing organic hemp sacks and living in the forest and washing them once a year. It's about re-examining your relationship with your wardrobe. And when we don't make our clothes or know where they come from even, we don't have that relationship with them and we don't treat them like crafted pieces, but we can. It's a mindset, it's not a purchase. You know, you can have a wardrobe full of Primark clothes, and if you treat them with respect, then you are doing better than 99% of the world. And each item in your wardrobe deserves that respect, wherever it's come from. And I mean, at the end of the day, it was crafted by someone, and maybe not someone you know, maybe not someone you'll ever meet, but it's an item that's been made. And embroidery is an easy way to adapt to that mindset because you're putting your mark on that item. So if we could go to the next slide, please, Lara. So how can we link this to the circular economy? Well, for the non-economic majors watching, a circular economy is a system aimed at eliminating waste and the continual use of resources. So instead of buying a kettle with your money and then the kettle breaking and you throwing it out and buying a new kettle, it's a way that aims to eliminate that waste by recycling, and not just by putting it in the recycling bin, but by recycling the item and the resources inside it, reusing it. Let's say turning that kettle into a flower pot. You know, that's one way of doing it. It's simply about reducing that waste. How can embroidery help that? You all ask. Well, when you put something meaningful into the circular economy, it affects the whole chain. Money is a really abstract concept. You know, it's such an impersonal way of buying things, but crafting and producing isn't, because you know what went into producing that item. So here's an example from literally last week. So my friend Belinda, she raises chickens and she sells the eggs. She just had a baby. And I said to her, I said, how many eggs would it take? How many eggs would you give me if I made you an embroidery hoop to celebrate the birth of your son? And she said, 4 dozen. I'll give you 12 eggs a week in exchange for an embroidery hoop. And so that's what we did. I made her an embroidery hoop and she gave me 4 dozen eggs. instead of having that kind of abstract cash in the middle where you think, oh, well, those eggs cost me £2, but what does that mean? You know, she looked after the embroidery, and she had more respect for the process of raising these chickens and looking after them, because we could see something tangible that came from it. You know, when you swap an item you've crafted with an item someone else has crafted, you know the relationship behind it and you know what it means, and you treat both with more respect. But, you know, if you buy a t-shirt for £2 from Shein or Zaffle or Romwe, you'll probably think to yourself, oh, well, it's got a tear in it. Oh, it was only £2. It's fine. Just throw it out. Or even, oh, it doesn't really fit. I can't be bothered to return it. It only costs £2. And I know, because I've been there and I've done that. And I had a wardrobe full of items that didn't fit or were damaged, that I thought to myself, oh, it's not worth fixing. But when you consciously make your purchases or exchange your purchases, you don't feel that way, because you know what went into it. And you care for them. You care for them because you know what went into it. So if we could go to the next slide. So here's what we're going to cover. We're going to talk about fabrics in like a really mini crash course, so that we can learn better about how to fix individual types of fabric. And then we're going to do 2 mini workshops, one on invisible mending and one on visible mending. And if at any point you have questions or I'm going too fast, just let Lara or me know, or shout, and then we'll slow down a bit. So if we could go to the next slide. So fabric, really simply, is a collection of fibers put together in a way that makes them stick. And there are hundreds of thousands of different kinds of fabrics from all over the world and all over time. But you can generally put them into 3 categories: woven fabrics, non-woven fabrics, and knit fabrics. And I'm not going to begin to even cover how to fix every single kind, because we would be here for the next 5 years. But I'll just give a kind of real general overview that will help you understand kind of what makes up your clothes, and why, when tears happen, what happens, why they happen, you know, that kind of theory behind it. So woven fabric, we'll begin with woven. It's easily identified. It's a series of threads, really long bits of fiber, let's say like embroidery thread, running vertically and horizontally. And that forms a sheet. You know, it forms a sheet of fabric, somewhat like this. Yeah, it's the kind of fabric we're used to seeing a lot. A lot of clothes are made out of it. And chiffon, corduroy, silk, denim, cotton, linen are all woven fabrics. And what makes them woven is just the fact it's threads vertically and horizontally. But because they're vertically and horizontally thread, if you see a tear, then you'll see fraying. So for example, here is my lovely tear. I don't know if you can see too well on the camera, but it's beginning to fray. And you start to see the little fibers kind of come off. And that's because it's made of these threads that are horizontal and vertical. And so it's quite a difficult thing to repair, because when you get one tear, that's the structure of the fabric damaged. But I will show you very soon how we fix it. And then you have non-woven things. So it's basically often made by heat or by pressing. So example, plastic bags are a non-woven fabric. Or if you see, you know, vinyl clothing's quite popular at the moment, the PVC style, that's a non-woven fabric. And it often doesn't fray when you see a tear, but obviously it's very difficult to fix, because if it was made by heat, you have to fix it with heat. And so that is a job for your tailor. If you see any vinyl that's ripped, don't put a hairdryer to it, take it to your tailor. And then knit fabrics. I mean, I'm sure we've all got a jumper somewhere in our wardrobe. That's what knit fabric is. It's a bit like woven fabric in that it's horizontal and vertical, but instead, you know, the way that you knit and you put things together, it's actually all vertical rows. And for example, I have here my lovely jumper. It's a bit too warm to be wearing now. But as you can see on this really chunky knit, it's a patterned way of knitting. It's not just an in and out, up and down. And that's what makes knit. But we're going to deal with woven fabric today simply because it's the most popular. It's what the majority of our clothes are made of. So, you know, t-shirts, dresses are often made of a kind of cotton mix. And number two is that you can fix it with embroidery. It's a kind of embroidery, the way that the threads work together in the first place. And so it's really ideal for mending through embroidery. And so if we go on to the 7th slide. So what is embroidery? And maybe you're going to laugh at this question, but it's just the craft of decorating fabric with needle and thread. If you are doing that, you're doing embroidery, no matter how simple or difficult or creative, that's embroidery. And it's really old. It's been around since 30,000 BC, or at least that's as far as the records have gone. They found fossilized fabric, which has been embroidered. And really, even though today we're embroidering all sorts of new things on our clothes, it's just a continuation of that tradition. And in a way, that kind of makes me feel really cool about it, you know, knowing that it's been going on for, God, 32,000 years, and we're probably hoping it will go on for another 32,000. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to start with our invisible mending. So if we could end the PowerPoint, and I will show you the chair again. So this, unfortunately, I cut into it. I know, very naughty. Ironically, it's not going to be too invisible because I'm going to show you it using a really bright thread, just so you can see kind of what I'm doing. So we've got my hot pink thread. It's my favorite color. And I'm going to try and hold this up a little bit better. So if you see, I've put it in the hoop, and you want to have your fabric in the hoop as tight as possible. And this is because if you do it quite loosely, what will happen is when you take it out of the hoop, you will find that the thread you've put in might be too wide, or it might be too short and it might rip. So you really want to have the fabric as flat as possible in the hoop, just to make sure that you're repairing it exactly in the way that the fabric flows. And what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that no fabric's missing. So this is a pretty big tear, but you can see that it goes together. And you're going to take your thread with a knot in the end. Number one advice, always knot the end of your thread, because the amount of times I've done a delicate stitch and it's pulled out the other end and I've gone to myself, oh my God. But you're going to start from the back, and you're going to push in about a centimetre or so from the bottom of the tear. Now, the reason we do this is because on fabric like this, which frays, if you put it right near the end, you'll simply find yourself losing it, or it will fray and it will come loose. So you want to give it a good anchor. And so for that, if you see here, hold it the right way, you can see exactly how far I've kind of put it in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull the fabric all the way through the thread, all the way through the fabric. And if you see at the back, it's knotted and it's solidly in. It's not going to go anywhere because of the fraying, because it's far enough in the material. Now I'm going to do a satin stitch. It's called a satin stitch simply because it looks like satin when it's done. It's just very neat rows of vertical stitching, and that's best for repairs because you've not got any extra texture. If you want your repair to be invisible, you want it to look as smooth as the original fabric. It's not the easiest. Honestly, you can do this while watching TV. You can do it while, I always do it while stroking my cats. So in one hand, I've got my thread like this, and in the other hand, you know, and it's simple. Anyone can do this. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our needle And we're going to do exactly the same in the other side. We're just going to pull it through. So you can see now I've just done the one, and I'm going to go back in again the other side from the back, and I'm going to pull it through again. Occasionally it'll get caught, as I have done here. Always happens. And what we're going to do is we're just going to repeat that. So you're going to thread it back in the other side about an inch away. You're going to pull it through again, and then you can start to see it build up. You're going to go along. You're going to pull it again, and then you can put it in the other side. And eventually what will happen is you'll build up a much wider piece of embroidery that will cover the tear completely. So you'll find that it will start to look quite smooth, where you've just got these threads going across. And while you can obviously see it in pink, if this was in white, it would begin to really disappear into the fabric. So I'm just going to do a couple more really quickly to show you, just so you can see the buildup of the fabric. And you can see there, I can hold it correctly on the camera, that it's starting to build up. And behind that, there is the tear, but it's really strong because this fabric is anchoring both sides together. It's not going to go anywhere, and it won't re-tear because you've completely covered the torn fabric. And it really is as easy as that for invisible repairs. I mean, one thing I would recommend as well is obviously color matching. So for example, I'm going to show you here a skirt of mine. It's just a linen skirt, a patterned one, thin material, but perfect for embroidering. I would want to find myself all of the colors on this fabric. So you see there's kind of like a very light yellow. I'd also want the green, and I'd want kind of like there's a bit of a darker yellow there. Get all the colors you can. And I recommend really going to a small business for that, because not only is it better for the environment to be supporting local businesses, but also they'll help you pick them out. It's a friendly community, embroidery, and you can always rely on other people to help you out, especially with color matching. Now, I will not carry on doing this massive tear because it would probably take a good hour, but I am going to show you where I repaired this skirt. Somewhere. So you can see here, this is where I repaired it. So you can see on the camera there that you can see where the stitching is, but when you actually look at it from afar, so when I take this hoop off, of course I have to pick the biggest skirt in the world for trying to hold it up to the camera, you really won't be able to see it. In fact, I can't see it, I can't find it. Where has it gone? That's just my kind of luck. But you know, it molds completely into the fabric. You won't see it, even though when you do the repair, you know it's there. It's all about everyone else's perception. They won't even notice. And now that piece of fabric is stronger than before. It's not even restoring it to how it was, it's strengthening it. And it's really as simple as that for invisible mending. It's not difficult. It's something you can just do in front of the TV, and you've saved something from going in the bin or going to a charity shop where someone else would put it in the bin. It's just a way to get another wear out of your clothes. Even if it's your first repair and it breaks after one more wear, you've got one more wear out of that item. You know, you've treated it with more respect than just putting it in the bin because it's broken. And I think, you know, at the end of the day, that's, oh, show us again. Okay. I know it's near the bottom somewhere. I am going to try and find this. Okay. So this is it, just in the bundle of fabric, and it's actually right there. And it was exactly the same kind of repair as I showed you, but I just color matched. So I did the same satin stitch, but where the leaf was meant to be, I satin stitched with the green, a little bit of yellow thrown in. In fact, I'm going to try and hold it really close. And if you can see there, that is, it's a really simple embroidery technique. There's nothing complicated about it. It was just a tear. I think I was in the supermarket, and you know when they have the hangers and they have the little tags on with the prices? I think I like threw myself up against the supermarket shelf and tore the fabric. As I tend to, I'm pretty clumsy. And it was just a small tear, and it probably took me 15 minutes, and now it's completely gone. You know, you don't have to take it anywhere. It was probably £1 worth of embroidery thread that I purchased, fixed. And so now we're going to move on to visible mending. And it's really simple again. I'm going to be doing this on fabric that isn't broken, simply because mending doesn't mean fixing something with a tear. Mending could be as simple as, I don't like this t-shirt anymore, and I'm going to mend it into something that I want to wear. It doesn't have to be broken to be fixed. And so I will be doing this just on a little hoop here. I've just got a scrap of fabric from every kind of offcut. And what I'll be doing is I'll be showing you how to do a really simple daisy bouquet. Yeah, this is a really cute hoop, isn't it? I love these tiny ones. They're like adorable. They make me so happy. And so I'm going to be going from start to finish on how I do this, okay? So number one, draw out your pattern. Now, I would very much recommend that you buy a kind of chalk, just so it washes out with water, because you never want to do as I'm doing now with a biro, simply because it will show up underneath. And the last thing you want is to do this beautiful embroidery and then find that you've got pen showing underneath. But just because we're on Zoom and it's quite difficult to see the chalk, I'm going to do a really short pattern in biro just to show you what I'll be embroidering. So I'm thinking today we go for some daisies, because they always look cute. They're super on trend at the moment. Daisy print is back in. And it takes literally minutes to do daisy print. So there is my daisies. Just 3 basic daisies. And what we're going to do is we're then going to pick out our colours. Now, if you're like me and you embroider all the time, you will have too many colours just in your daily bag. I also have 2 massive buckets of embroidery thread. But we're going to keep calm and pick out from a rather normal selection. But I'm a real fan at the moment at kind of muted colours, like the pastels, the kind of organic looking colours. And so I am going to pick out this beautiful kind of very light green as our stitching for the leaves and the stem. And so I usually like to take about as much as I can pull out with an arm like that, because any longer than that and you're pulling it through constantly. Get my scissors, chop it off at the base, tie a really simple knot in the end like that so it doesn't disappear anywhere. Find the needle that you've lost in the pile of embroidery thread. Get lost trying to unthread it from the other thread. There we go. And just find the end which you haven't knotted. And this is definitely not the professional way to do it, but I like to just nibble on the end of it so it's a bit flatter to put in the needle. That's not the professional way of doing it, but it's certainly how I thread my needles. So tiny bit of lipstick as well. And then just thread it in. Incredibly nerve-wracking on camera. Okay, I've done it. I've done it. Okay. Round of applause, please, guys. I'd like everyone to appreciate me me threading a needle where I'm thinking, oh my God, I'll never do this. Okay. Just like with the invisible mending, we're going to go in from the back, right at the bottom. I always like to start at the bottom and work my way up. You're just going to pull it through until you feel a good kind of tight tug on the end. Now, for the stem of the daisies, we're going to do a running stitch. Really similar to the stitch I showed you before. It's basically an in and out stitch. It's the kind of thing you learn in school. If you did any kind of sewing in school where you go in and out, and it's super simple. So you go in, pull it through, and then you go out the other side, pull it through, and you'll see here that it's already started to make kind of a mark. That's the green starting to come through. And then you do it again, you push it back in, you pull it through the other side. And then what you do is you go in the other side, and it's pretty repetitive, but it's a very simple one, you know. And then back out the other side. I'm just building some of this up, and then I'll be able to show you a bit of it done neatly. And you'll see how quick it is to do these kinds of stitches because they're really simple. Okay, so if you see there, the kind of stem, and it's super easy. You can even do it even faster. Like, so I've got my embroidery flat here. You push your needle through like that. And then instead of pushing it all the way in, putting the needle up and down through the fabric a little bit. So I'll show you now, if you can see that. It's kind of difficult, but you can see the way that I've actually just threaded it through up and down through the fabric. And then all you do is you pull your needle out the other side, and you've already done half that stem. And this is the stitch I like to do almost everything in. So I do lettering, anything that requires a line. You know, think of it like this. If you were doing a painting, it's what you'd use your finest brush for to do all the details. And you can't go wrong with it. There's no way to mess up this kind of stitch. Just gonna finish pushing.
Amy, we have a question in the chat from Catherine.
Oh,
are you going in and out of the same hole when you do
that's
that?
a really good question. So what I like to do is if I've got a straight line that I'm doing this stitch on, is I actually go in and out and I leave a gap, and then I go to the ends and then I go in and out, but back through the ones I've missed. So you end up with a line of solid embroidery, but you've not gone in circles each time. I don't know if that makes sense. It's just, I'm really stingy as well. I like to save thread, but you know, you can do it any way you like. You know, you can go in a circle each time and cover it. You can go back and forth. There are really no rules. It really doesn't affect it when people look at the front. It doesn't matter how messy it is in the back. And that is the story of this one, because I tangle thread, I make a mess of everything, but as long as from the front, you can see there, it's a neat line. And I think that, you know, really that's it for the running stitch. I wish I could give you any kind of more sage advice on it, but it really is a matter of just in and out until you think to yourself, I'm never going to finish this. And what I will do now is I'm going to do the leaf for you. So I've got a bit left of this green that I'm going to use, and we're going to go back and use that satin stitch that we did for the invisible mend. But I'm going to show you now how it will look when you are wanting it to be visible. So go to the bottom of the leaf, just there, and you're going to take your needle and put it at the top of the leaf. So what I'm doing is I'm then pulling it through, and you see there how I've got that kind of like line. And what we're going to do is we're just going to thread it back in at the bottom, and we're going to do that same line again, but just a tiny bit further over so that you end up not sewing on top of the original one. And then you push it back in, and then you go over again. I'm going to do this one more time to show you. how it's beginning to look. And then if you see here, you start to see a leaf building up. And it really is as simple as just doing this kind of really flat, long stitch, because that's what leaves are. They're flat and long. You know, if you're stitching something that's spiky, do a spiky kind of stitch, you know, do lots of little short ones. But if it's something, you know, smooth and long, do a smooth and long stitch. And adding that texture to your work makes it look so real life. It really makes it look real. And especially when it comes to floral embroidery, there are loads of different stitches you can find on YouTube. That's how I learned all of my stitches, especially as there are people on there who have been embroidering for 50 years and don't have messy backs to their embroidery like me. And you can really learn from the experts what they do. And when you see something you like on Instagram or on YouTube, just take it and make it yourself. Try your techniques. You know, you can find that sometimes things you do as a mistake, you actually really like the look of. And it's really that simple. It's all an experiment, but I certainly use techniques now that I never thought would work. Now are kind of like motifs I use in my designs. And it's just a way of making your work unique. So 2 more stitches and I'll be done with this leaf. Almost there. Okay, so now you can see there. You see the leaf. And because I've used these kind of like long stitches, it looks more like a leaf than if I had used the, say, really short stitch that I was using for the stem. And so now I'm done with my green. So what I'm doing is I'm chopping off the green, put my needle down, and always make sure when you finish something like that, you tie the thread behind you, because otherwise it could just come back through the fabric and you'll lose it, which is not a recommended thing when you've spent ages working on a stitch and it disappears. Thank you, Catherine, for saying it looks great. And so now we've done the stem and we've done the leaf. And so now I'm going to show you how I'm going to do the leaves. So we're going to pick out colors now for our leaves. Now daisies kind of have that yellow center and the white kind of leaves. So I'm going to have a rummage in my box for a color which will work. Now, because I'm embroidering on white fabric, I'm going to do different colored leaves. But if you're embroidering on black, for example, this would show up fantastic. And so I'm going to begin now with the middle of the flower and use this kind of like yellow, that kind of like pastel yellow. Very summery, we're enjoying the sun. So just like before, we're going to take our fabric, take a good amount. I'm going to tie a knot in one end. There. And then we're going to thread our needle again. And eventually this will become autopilot for you. Like you'll always remember to tie knots in the end. And what we're going to do is where we've got our pattern, where we've got our daisy just there, I'm going to push it through the center of the daisy, just like that. And just like before, I'm going to pull it all the way through. Now, what I'm going to do now is called a French knot. This is a little bit trickier than the in and out kind of stitching. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to point the camera down so you can see, hopefully, what I'm doing. Can we all see that? Perfect. So I have my thread pulled through all the way here. What you're going to do is where you've got the fabric, you're going to hold your thread up by about 5 centimeters, maybe. You're going to get your needle in your other hand, push it against, and loop it round. And you want to hold the fabric in your other hand, the thread, pretty tight. what you're going to do is you're going to push it back in. So as you push it, do you see you have it looped around the needle? And you're going to push it through, hold it down with your thumb so that it doesn't escape. And you're going to pull it out the other side. And when you do that, you create a tiny knot. And it's a way of adding kind of like a texture to your fabric. And I like to do quite a few of these in the center. So I'm going to push the needle back through again, take the needle in the other hand, hold the thread tight, put it up, loop around, push through, and I'm going to do it again, and then pull it through again. And you'll see now that there are two there, and you start to see the center become a bit bolder. And then I just like to do as many as I need. So this is me doing it full speed, pushing it through, pulling again. And then as you can see, we've now got another one on the pile. And it really is a very quick way of adding texture, but also a way of covering fabric. So this is called a French knot. And what you can do is, I'll show you here, is you can even loop it more than once. And the more times you loop the fabric, the bigger the knot will be. So I've been doing it once. I'm going to do it 3 times, and I'll push through. And I will show you that you see on the end here, we have a much bigger knot. And that's a really good way, especially of, let's say when you're doing a kind of flower where you want to a triangle shape, like for example, a foxglove or a delphinium, or for example, so I have some stocks behind me, actually. This is perfect. We're moving, guys. So I'm going to show you a real flower and then how I'd embroider it. So if you see here, I have some stocks. So if I was going to embroider this flower, I would do the running stitch as the stem, and I would use French knots to do each one of these little flowers. And what I would do is I'd start at the bottom and maybe loop it 5 or 6 times here. And then as you move near the top and the flowers get smaller, I would then go down to a tiny French knot. And you'll find that it looks just like the flower. You'll get that kind of effect of buds. And it's a really good technique for floral embroidery. It really makes such a difference. And I can only say that it is absolutely beautiful. I wish I had a way to show you, but all of my hoops with French knots disappear. In fact, if we could you actually show the PowerPoint again and go to the slide with my embroidery, and I'll show you an example of French knots that aren't done for floral embroidery, but have that kind of texture. Okay, so if you see that all you need is love heart up there, that is made completely of French knots that I did in colors. I went from red up in an ombre kind of to this very light pink. I think that was about 500 French knots. And it took me a while. Let's just say it was a hoop that took a long time. But it really has such a beautiful texture. It's really striking on fabric. And for example, if you embroidered that on a t-shirt, even if you just had it, you know, kind of like as above your heart, you know, it will have a really nice effect on what you embroider. Yeah, 500. I reached the end and I said to myself, I will never do a French knot again. I am so sick of these. But then a week later, I was like, oh no, I really like them. And really, that's how I would do the center of this daisy. So now if we could, sorry, Lara, if we could unshare the screen, and I will do our final stitch, which ironically is called a lazy daisy stitch. And the reason it's called that is because I don't know if any of you ever made daisy crowns at school. You know, when you go and pick daisies in a field and you make a tiny hole in the end of the stem and you thread it through and you try and thread it again and again, and it often breaks and they never work. But that kind of technique where each hole relies on the next one, that is what makes the stitch. So what I'm doing is I'm taking a blue now just to show you. I mean, obviously daisies are white, but this is a much brighter color for on our white background. And so just like before, I'm cutting my thread at a reasonable length, knotting the end. And then I'm just gonna thread my needle. Now this one does require a little bit more concentration, just because it's got a few more steps to it. But once you learn how to do it, it's super simple. Okay, Cynthia made daisy crowns and they didn't break. All hail Cynthia, because I could never figure it out. I was not great at daisy crowns. So I have my blue thread here, and I'm going to go in just above where I did those French knots. So if you see my needle coming through there, I'm going to pull it through all the way to the end. And then at the top of that daisy pattern where the leaf is, I'm going to put it back in. Oh, and what you're going to do is you're not actually going to pull it all the way through. So if you see me, it's slowly going through, but you want to leave just a tuft, this loop you see coming through. And what you're going to do is you're going to pull it just so you've got a bit left, and the needle, which is now at the back of the fabric, you're going to push through where you want the leaf to end. And you're going to push it through, and you're going to hook in that thread while you're there. And you're going to pull it, not too tightly, because you want the leaf to be, quite fluffy. You don't want a really tight leaf. And then you're going to go back in right next to that hole, not back into the hole, but right next to it. And that's just going to stitch down that leaf. And then what I'll do is I'll show you what that creates. I don't know if you can see there, it's created a petal. So we're going to do one more back where the French knots were, right at the base in the center of that daisy. We're going to stick our needle up through, pull it all the way, put it back in right near that hole again, leave just a tiny bit so that we have that loop, put your needle back up where you want the petal to end, loop it in, pull it through really gently, and then pin it down by going back in near that hole. And then you'll see now, fluff it out if you need to. Once you've done that final stitch, you need to pull the thread out a bit more. And you can see there we have another lazy daisy stitch. And if you go all the way around that flower, you'll find yourself really simply making a tiny flower. Oh, Sigdem, it's a stitch that I found really difficult to learn. And then once you know how to do it, it's in your head. It's like riding a bike. You never forget. So I'm going to do one more. You just pull it through. It's quite therapeutic, actually, when you do these stitches. Push it through where you want the leaf to end. Pull your needle through. And tack it down. And there you'll see I've now got 3 of them. And because you're not just doing like a straight in and out stitch, you have more texture again. So these ones are quite fluffy stitches, kind of like the way daisy petals kind of go outwards. They're not flat on the daisy. And recreating it like this, you really have such a realistic look on your embroidery. And then really the next step is just do the stitch again and again and again and again until you have as many daisies as you want. And you can then put all sorts around the daisy. You can put, tiny French knots that look like fireflies, for example, on a black shirt. Or you can do, for example, if you wanted to do fairy lights, you use that running stitch to make the string of the lights, and then do a tiny yellow French knot, and you have you have fairy lights. And that kind of simple decoration looks fantastic. And it really takes a plain t-shirt that otherwise you would have thrown away, and it makes it something really unique. And I mean, I am no expert by any means, but when I wear things that I've embroidered, people always ask, oh my God, where did you get that from? And it's so nice to be really smug and go, wow, I made it myself. It makes my day. It's one of those things where you feel really cool for a moment, you know. And really, that's it. You know, it's that simple. And yeah, gifting as well. It's a really fantastic way, especially if, you know, for example, if one of your friends has a baby, you can buy a baby grow and you can embroider their name on it using that running stitch. And it's a really fantastic gift that says that you care a lot about them, but you're not having to, you know, buy some overpriced baby toy that will end up in landfill in 6 months' time. You know, you're making something which can be passed down. Or especially these hoops are fantastic. I always embroider. If it's a boy, I do a little stork carrying a parcel. And if it's a girl, I sometimes do flowers. And you just put their name and their birth, and I can guarantee you that parents will look after it for years. You know, it's a really nice way of just remembering not only the birth of their child, but of a friendship with a really talented person. And it's that simple, you know. You guys are now talented embroiderers. And so yeah, that's it for the embroidery workshop. So if we could put the last slide up, if that's okay. Perfect. And so I'd just like to say thank you, Lara and Cynthia. They've been behind the scenes organizing this non-stop. And I'm really grateful to them for allowing me to have the opportunity to come and share my love of embroidery. And most of all, I want to thank all of you that have come along today and given up an hour of your time to find out how to revitalize your clothes. I know that it can feel really overwhelming about what to do about the climate crisis. But if you walk away from this workshop, even if you decide that embroidering's not for you and you don't like it, if you look at your clothes with a little bit more consideration and, you know, kind of thought as to where they've come from, even if you just think, oh, who made that t-shirt? You know, you are helping the whole supply chain. You're helping people, and it really makes a difference. I mean, a t-shirt takes 2,700 litres of water to make. If every person in the UK bought one less t-shirt a year, so let's say, you know, instead of buying a new t-shirt, they decided to embroider a daisy on it instead and wear it again, we'd save 186 billion litres of water. That's 75,000 Olympic swimming pools of water we'd be saving just from buying one less t-shirt each. And you think that's such a small thing to do, you know, it's such a minute detail for each of us, but that's the power of collective action. And so I'd really love for you all to check out Slow Fashion Global's Fashion Detox campaign. Basically, for 3 months, we're not buying anything new. We're going to thrift, we're going to mend, we're going to embroider, make, swap, but we're not going to go out and buy anything new. And I'd love for you to just go and check it out, perhaps sign up, share with your friends. And yeah, next time you think to yourself, I want something new, maybe you'll pick up an embroidery, needle and thread, and make something unique. And I just want to say thank you all for having me. And if there are any questions, I am absolutely here, and you can ask away, but thank you. You're all so shocked, aren't you? You're all just speechless.
Thank you so much, Amy. I had troubles unmuting myself. That's why I was silent. But yeah, this was amazing. Yeah, I've learned so much, and I'm really excited, as have some others already pointed out in the chat, to watch the recording and go back and like try it out myself. I have two questions that I'm just gonna start with, and then if any other questions come up, we can also go back to those. I'm just gonna pull the slide down again, so we can see you better. So my first question is regarding the knotting at the end when you're done with the stitches, because I'm like I've done knitting and like some other things, and I never really know how to do that. So do you have any tips for that?
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously with knitting, when you finish a row, you have to cast off, right? I'm not much of a knitter, but I know there's like a technique to it. Embroidery is really simple. So you want to, let's say you're finished with your thread. So I'm going to cut mine with enough that I have room to knot. And so you see, I have a little strand at the back here, just kind of hanging loose. And I often find that on the back, where you've done other threads, you'll also have loose knots. And the next thing to do is just tie them together. You'll have loose threads from other colors. And when you tie them together, you form a kind of like web that provides even more structure to the back. If not, just try and do like a little kind of knot if you can. You know, when you like try and, it's very difficult to show without two hands. But so for example, if I had nothing to attach this to, I would, well, number one, I would start another thread for another color, and I'd make sure I leave a bit of that to tie. So let's say I'm pulling through a new one now. You can even tie that round. Just be resourceful, I find. And maybe that's not like the set way to do it, but it's certainly how I do mine, and I find that it lasts really well. If you're concerned about the backing of it, or you don't want, or if you know, for example, your t-shirt is going to be worn everywhere and thrown in the washing machine, and you really want it heavy duty, what you can do is you can get some Wonder Web. It's a kind of the kind of glue, actually, almost, that you iron on, and just get another piece of fabric and put that over the back where the knots are at the back. So you put it on the back of this, you put another piece of fabric down. I have one around here somewhere. I thought I did. So let's take some more fabric from somewhere. So let's say here I've got some more fabric here. And what you do is you'd put it over the back, and it would then iron on and fuse. And so you know that none of the threading is going to be disturbed because it's stuck down, and it's even stronger. And for me, I've never had anything come loose that way. It tends to be, it's a pretty solid way of decorating things. And it's especially these running stitches and stuff, each stitch actually anchors itself in. So even if it does come loose, you'll only lose one tiny thread, and just go back and repair it, is what I find. But fingers crossed, just like me, it doesn't come loose. And yet, so Yulita said, I tie them while the thread is still in the needle, using the needle and not the fingers to knot it. Very good advice, very clever. I always prick my fingers, but that's because I'm so clumsy. But if you're smarter than me, you'll be able to do it just like that. And you said you had a second question.
Yeah, so first of all, thank you. That's amazing. So just, yeah, get creative, I guess, with how to knot and what to knot with each other. So my second question is regarding the invisible mending. Is there any difference in how I would approach a piece of fabric that's like kind of stretchy material?
Yeah, so stretchy material, obviously, as I'm sure from what I've shown you, can have its own problems. So when you put non-stretchy material in the hoop like this, so for example, this is linen, it doesn't stretch, it's solid. You want to put it in as tight as possible. When you embroider something that is a little bit stretchy, either it's woven and it has lycra or something like that, you want to put it in the hoop flat, but not stretched open. So kind of how you would wear it as if it was on you. So for example, this is a jersey stretchy material I have on. So I would want to put it, in fact, I'm going to put the hoop over my top to show you. So I'm going to put the hoop underneath, and then you press it down, and you just want to have it. If you see it's tight, but it's not, it's movable, just as you would have it. And then you'd fix it in the same way. You might find you need to sew quite gently, so you don't want to really tug the thread through, because otherwise you'll pull it together. But it's much simpler than you'd think. It's just a matter of thinking about how the fabric's going to look when it's on and trying to mimic that level of tightness. So, you know, if it's a bodycon dress you're trying to fix, then put it in the hoop tightly because it will sit on your body tightly. But if it's, for example, a skirt that's quite loose, or like a skater style skirt, you can have it a bit looser, just so that you know how it's going to flow when you fix it. And one thing I will say, please do follow me on Instagram. It's Amy Elizabeth Leete, and I will always answer any questions. Like, send me a message and I will try my best, whether it's picking fabric or, you know, fixing invisible mending. You can always message me. I'm always happy to talk about embroidery.
Cool, thank you so much. I have a lot of like tank tops that have like these tiny little holes from, I don't know, the washing machine or something. So I'm sure I can use my new skills on those.
Absolutely, I do the same.
Yeah, so are there any other questions from other participants that Amy can answer?
If you do come up with something later, like I said, you can always message me. I don't bite.
Yeah, and so for those of us who are live here, you can find those details in the chat, and when we post the recording, we'll make sure to add those details in the description. Oh yeah, there's one
Leete
question.
Said, what thread do you use? Okay, so I use a thread called embroidery floss. If you go to any kind of craft store, they'll know what you mean, even if you say embroidery thread. And what it is it's a lot thicker than sewing thread. So when you buy that kind of, like, you know, if you buy a sewing kit, you get very thin thread. And I mean, you could embroider with it, but it will take you 8 times as long because it's such a thin thread. So embroidery thread, I'm just going to show you here, is actually about 6 to 8 mini threads put together. And what they do is they twist it round until it looks like one piece. What you can do is, for example, if you want to do a slightly thinner embroidery, is you can actually separate it. And you'll make a much thinner line than, for example, I was doing with the daisy. And that's the beauty of embroidery thread, is you can change the thickness of it. And you can even double stitch. So for example, if you wanted a really thick line, you can stitch you twice. You know, you can use double the thread. And so that's what I'd recommend. Some people stitch with ribbon. If you look on Instagram, type in #ribbon embroidery, you can really embroider with anything. But I'm using embroidery floss. That's what I like to use. And yeah, it's really up to you. It's the sky's the limit.
Yeah, super cool. I think I've learned so many different things, but one thing that I learned from you tonight is definitely that it's the creativity is limitless. So just like go with the flow, do what you feel like, and improvise, I guess.
Catherine said I probably will have lots of questions when I try to fix something. Catherine knows me. Please let me know, even if it's a matter of just color matching. I'll tell you which one I think looks a bit better. Yeah, any kind of fixing. I am always there for questions to be answered, just because when I started out, people helped me out. YouTube videos helped me, and, you know, finding people on the internet who loved embroidery too. Any tips for embroidery on denim and leather? I'll start with leather. The answer is it's very difficult. Just because, like I said at the beginning, leather is a non-woven fabric. So it's made from cow skin, or even faux leather is made from PVC. And so it doesn't embroider well because it's a type of fused fabric. And especially traditional leather, you can stitch, but it's very difficult to pull the needle through. In terms of denim is perfect for embroidery, but if you're picking something to embroider, choose a very light denim in terms of heaviness. But just because it's very difficult to push through that needle. And so that would be my recommendation, is you pick the lightest fabric. It's a very simple answer. I don't know if you heard me. Did I break up a bit there?
Yeah, a little bit in between. I think after you said that it's a bit tricky to push the needle through too thick of a fabric.
Okay, I'll summarize really shortly. Leather, very difficult because it's not a woven fabric. But denim is the perfect material. Just pick the thinnest denim you can, because it makes it very hard to push through the needle. Obviously, the thicker the fabric, the more force you need to pull it through, and your fingers will be grateful when you're using a thinner fabric. But denim looks fantastic embroidered. I really recommend trying a pair of jeans, or any kind of denim item. Looks really great. Don't know if there's any other questions. Thank you.
Okay, I think if that's all in terms of questions, we can wrap it up. Yeah, thank you so much, Amy. This was so much fun. You did a really amazing job to show the things, and I'm sure when I watch the recording, it's like super easy to follow and create my first own embroidery. Yeah. As Amy said, reach out to her if you have any questions, and I hope all of you here enjoyed the workshop as much as I did. Oh, the recording, we will share that on the Circular Economy Society YouTube channel, but also on the Slow Fashion UK channel. So on either of those channels, you should be able to see the recording. Great.
Lovely. And just thank you again. Thank you everyone for attending, Lara and Cynthia for organising. It's really been a pleasure.
Yeah, it has been a pleasure to have you. So yeah, to wrap it up, I hope all of you have a wonderful rest of the day and enjoy all your future embroidery trials.
Lovely. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.